She followed the diet perfectly for 6 months, counted every calorie, cut out bread, sugar, pasta, and her belly fat got worse. That's not a failure of willpower. That's a locked cell. Your fat cells have a chemical lock on them. And without the right molecular keys, your body physically cannot release what's stored there. No amount of restriction opens that lock. Only specific compounds found in specific foods do. In this video, you'll discover 10 everyday foods that carry those keys, what each one triggers inside your body at a cellular level, and the exact way to use each one so it actually works. Stay through to number 7, because it targets a hormonal lock that silently activates after age 50 and that almost no diet plan accounts for. Quick question before we start. How many times have you cut your food intake, stayed consistent for weeks, and watched your belly stay completely still? If that's you, this is exactly why. And today that changes. 1. The lock itself. Why restriction alone fails. Picture a fat cell as a locked storage room. The door has a handle, but the handle only turns when a specific chemical signal reaches it. That signal is called lipolysis, and it's triggered by hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline flooding the cell's surface receptors. When those hormones are absent or blocked by chronic stress, poor sleep, or a diet full of refined carbs, the door stays shut. You can eat less all you want. The room doesn't open. Calorie restriction without the right signals is just hunger with no results. A 2019 review published in Obesity Reviews confirmed that individuals with chronically elevated cortisol showed significantly lower lipolytic activity in abdominal fat tissue compared to those with balanced cortisol levels. The belly specifically has 4 times more cortisol receptors than fat elsewhere on the body. That's why stress hits the waistline first and hardest, so your real job isn't eating less. It's sending the right unlock signals through what you eat. That's what this entire list is built around. Start paying attention to how each food communicates with your cells, not just what's on the nutrition label. 2. Raw cacao, the workout you eat. Here's something the chocolate industry would rather you didn't know. The raw bean that all chocolate comes from contains compounds that mimic a hard workout inside your nervous system. Raw cacao, before sugar and processing strip it down, is packed with flavanols, a class of compounds that stimulate your adrenal glands to release noradrenaline. That's one of the primary hormones that binds to fat cell receptors and signals them to open and release stored fat for energy. Cacao doesn't taste like exercise, but your fat cells can't tell the difference. A controlled trial published in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry found that flavanol-rich cacao consumption increased fat oxidation rates during rest, meaning participants burned more stored fat doing nothing differently except adding cacao. The critical detail: commercial chocolate has most flavanols processed out and sugar added in, which actively works against fat loss by spiking insulin. Go straight to the source. Raw cacao powder stirred into plain Greek yogurt, blended into a morning smoothie, or mixed into black coffee gives you 1 to 2 tablespoons of pure flavanol activity. Cacao nibs, crunchy pieces of the raw bean, work sprinkled over oatmeal or eaten like nuts. One practical note: cacao contains moderate caffeine, so keep it to morning or early afternoon. Poor sleep raises cortisol, and cortisol locks those fat cell doors right back shut. 3. Kimchi and sauerkraut, the bacteria running your waistline. What if the reason your belly fat won't move has nothing to do with calories and everything to do with what's living in your gut right now? Researchers at the Catholic University of Louvain identified a specific gut bacterium called Akkermansia mucinifila that consistently appears in higher concentrations in lean individuals compared to those carrying excess abdominal fat. People with more of it handle blood sugar better, show lower fasting insulin, and accumulate less visceral fat over time. Your gut bacteria may be managing your waistline without asking your permission. The fastest dietary way to support Akkermansia growth is through fermented foods, specifically raw kimchi and unpasteurized sauerkraut. These contain live bacterial cultures that improve the overall gut environment, making it easier for beneficial strains to thrive. The critical mistake most people make: grabbing the shelf-stable jar at the supermarket. Heat treatment during packaging kills the live cultures entirely. Look specifically for kimchi or sauerkraut in the refrigerated section, labeled raw, unpasteurized, or contains live cultures. 2 to 3 tablespoons alongside a protein-based meal is all you need. As a side, stirred into a salad or eaten straight from the jar. Small habit, measurable shift in your gut ecosystem within 2 to 3 weeks of consistency. 4. Lentils, the workout you never did. 1 cup of cooked lentils delivers something almost no other single food can: 18 grams of protein and 15 grams of fiber simultaneously. The protein preserves lean muscle while you're in a calorie deficit. Critical, because muscle is what keeps your resting metabolism from collapsing as you lose weight. The fiber slows glucose absorption, keeping insulin low and your body in fat-burning mode for longer after each meal. But the real advantage of lentils is buried deeper than the nutrition label. Lentils give you metabolic benefits your gym session charges you for. Lentils contain resistant starch, a carbohydrate that bypasses normal digestion entirely and travels to the colon, where gut bacteria ferment it into short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate. Butyrate activates the same AMPK pathway your body switches on during fasting and aerobic exercise, the pathway responsible for pulling stored fat into cells to be burned for energy. A practical trick amplifies this effect. Cook your lentils, then refrigerate them before eating. Cooling increases resistant starch content by a meaningful margin, as confirmed by research published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Cold lentils in a salad with olive oil and lemon are not just convenient. They're metabolically more effective than lentils eaten hot straight from the pot. Half a cup to 1 full cup a few times a week. 5. Cayenne pepper. 20 minutes to ignition. Most fat-burning foods work slowly, building up over days and weeks before you notice anything. Cayenne pepper starts working within 20 minutes of your first bite. The active compound, capsaicin, binds to receptors called TRPV1 that are embedded throughout your body, including directly in your fat tissue. When those receptors activate, 2 things happen simultaneously. Your metabolic rate rises temporarily as your body generates heat, and your brown adipose tissue, the rare type of fat that burns energy rather than storing it, gets recruited into activity. 1 food. 2 fat-burning mechanisms. 20 minutes. A meta-analysis published in Appetite in 2014, covering over a dozen controlled trials, found that capsaicin consumption produced consistent increases in energy expenditure and measurable reductions in abdominal fat over time. You don't need an aggressive dose to get the effect. A 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne stirred into eggs, soup, or a salad dressing is enough to trigger TRPV1 activation. If cayenne feels too sharp, start with milder varieties like Hatch green chile or Anaheim pepper. Capsaicin is present across all hot peppers, just at different concentrations. Tolerance builds faster than most people expect, usually within 1 to 2 weeks of regular use. You now have 5 of the 10 keys, and the next 5 go deeper, including the hormonal one for anyone over 50 that most health channels never address properly. Before we get there, if this is making sense to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video in this series covers the breakfast timing window that determines whether your body burns fat or stores it for the first 6 hours of the day. Now, back to the keys. 6. Sweet potatoes. Breaking the belly fat cycle. A researcher at the University of Tokyo spent years puzzled by a consistent pattern in metabolic data. Patients with the most belly fat almost universally showed the lowest blood levels of a hormone called adiponectin. The cruel irony, he documented, published in the International Journal of Obesity, is that the more abdominal fat you carry, the more your fat tissue actively suppresses adiponectin production. The hormone that helps you burn fat gets turned off by the very fat you're trying to lose. Breaking that cycle requires something that directly stimulates adiponectin release. The fatter the belly, the harder the belly fights to stay. Sweet potatoes are one of the few foods with documented evidence for raising adiponectin levels. Unlike refined carbohydrates that spike blood glucose and push insulin high, shutting down fat burning for hours, one medium sweet potato releases energy gradually due to its fiber content and unique starch structure. And here's a preparation detail that significantly amplifies the effect. Cook sweet potatoes, then refrigerate before eating. Cooling converts a portion of the starch into resistant starch, the same gut-fermenting, AMPK-activating compound discussed with lentils. Cold roasted sweet potato cubed into a grain bowl or meal-prepped salad is, metabolically speaking, a meaningfully different food than hot sweet potato eaten straight from the oven. 7. Edamame, the hormonal fix. After 50, here is what nobody explains clearly about menopause and belly fat. Estrogen doesn't just regulate reproduction, it actively governs where your body decides to deposit fat. While estrogen is present at normal levels, fat storage favors the hips and thighs. When estrogen drops sharply in perimenopause and menopause, typically between ages 47 and 53, the body redirects fat storage with precision straight to the visceral tissue around the abdomen. Calorie restriction cannot override a hormonal redirection signal. That requires a different approach entirely. You're not eating more. Your body just changed the address where it sends the fat. Edamame contains isoflavones, plant compounds structurally similar enough to estrogen that they can bind to estrogen receptors and produce a partial mimicking effect. A clinical review in menopause. The Journal of the North American Menopause Society found that isoflavone intake was associated with measurable reductions in waist circumference in postmenopausal women over 12 weeks. 1 cup of shelled edamame delivers approximately 17 grams of protein, 8 grams of fiber, and a clinically relevant dose of isoflavones. Steam from frozen in 5 minutes, add to grain bowls, stir fries, or blend into a dip. Choose non-GMO, organic where possible. For men concerned about soy, normal food portions of edamame show no effect on testosterone levels in any peer-reviewed trial to date. 8. Whole almonds. The label is wrong. What if the calorie count printed on a food label was simply wrong, not as an error, but because the food itself physically prevents full absorption? The USDA tested this exact question with almonds in a controlled metabolic study. The label on a standard serving reads 170 calories. What the study found, the human body absorbs approximately 129 calories from that same serving. Roughly 25% of the listed calories never enter your system. The reason is structural. Almonds have exceptionally tough cell walls surrounding each fat droplet inside the nut. Chewing and digestion break most things down completely, but almond cell walls remain largely intact, and the fat locked inside them passes through unabsorbed. The nutrition label on almonds is wrong, and that's entirely in your favor. Beyond the absorption gap, a 12-week randomized controlled trial found that participants eating a quarter cup of whole almonds daily, on the same calorie-restricted diet as a control group, lost significantly more abdominal fat than those who ate no almonds. Researchers attributed this to the high monounsaturated fat content in almonds having a preferentially high fat oxidation rate, meaning the body actively chooses to burn it over other fat sources. One critical detail: this effect only applies to whole almonds. Almond butter destroys the cell walls completely during grinding, making every calorie fully bioavailable. 23 whole almonds, roughly a quarter cup, Mid-morning between breakfast and lunch keeps blood sugar stable straight through to your next meal. 9. Broccoli. The liver. Nobody talks about your liver processes more than food. It also breaks down and clears excess hormones circulating in your bloodstream, including estrogen. When that clearance process slows down, residual estrogen accumulates, and elevated estrogen in both men and women is directly associated with increased visceral fat deposition around the abdomen. Broccoli addresses this through a compound called sulforaphane, which activates the liver's phase 2 detoxification enzymes, the specific systems responsible for packaging and clearing hormone metabolites before they recirculate. A sluggish liver doesn't just make you tired, it makes belly fat permanent. Research from the Journal of Nutrition confirmed that sulforaphane measurably upregulates these detox pathways within hours of consumption. 2 preparation details matter enormously here. First, avoid boiling broccoli to softness. Water-soluble sulforaphane precursors leach out and are lost. Light steaming for 3 to 4 minutes preserves them. Second, and this is the part most people skip, chop your broccoli and let it sit for 10 full minutes before applying heat. Chopping ruptures cell walls and activates an enzyme called myrosinase, which dramatically increases sulforaphane formation before heat can deactivate it. That 10-minute rest costs nothing and meaningfully increases the potency of every serving. 1 to 2 cups, a few times per week, steamed or raw in salads. 10. Sardines, $2. One study. Remarkable results. A fillet of wild-caught salmon costs $10 to $15. A can of sardines costs under $2. The salmon gets all the attention. The sardines deliver more. In a randomized controlled trial conducted in Barcelona, 152 adults over 65, all pre-diabetic, were placed on an identical diabetes prevention diet. The only variable, half the group added 2 cans of sardines per week. After 12 months, the proportion of participants at very high risk for type 2 diabetes in the sardine group dropped from 37% to 8%. The group without sardines remained essentially unchanged. 2 cans a week. Risk dropped from 37 to 8. The researchers identified the mechanism as a nutrient synergy. Sardines uniquely combine omega-3 fatty acids, taurine, calcium, and vitamin D in a single whole food. Omega-3s calm inflammatory stress signals in fat tissue, helping fat cells open and release stored fat. Taurine improves insulin sensitivity and blood sugar regulation. Calcium and vitamin D regulate the hormonal signals governing whether fat cells store or release. Individually, each nutrient helps. Together, in whole food form, the effect is amplified in ways that supplementation alone doesn't replicate, according to the Barcelona research team. 1 to 2 cans per week. Choose sardines packed in olive oil or water. Avoid soybean oil. Mix into tomato sauce, mash onto crackers, or toss into a lemon garlic salad. The taste adjusts within a week or 2 of regular eating. 10 foods. 10 chemical keys that your fat cells are waiting for. The pattern across all of them is the same. Your body doesn't release stored fat on command. It releases it in response to specific molecular signals. Flavonols, resistant starch, capsaicin, isoflavones, sulforaphane, omega-3s. Give your body those signals consistently, and the lock opens. If you want to make this work faster, the most important window is the first meal of the day. Watch the next video. Eat these 10 breakfast foods every day to get rid of belly fat, where we cover exactly which morning foods keep your metabolism in fat-burning mode from the moment you wake up, and the common breakfast mistakes that undo everything before noon. Not professional advice. Consult a qualified expert as needed.